Well, each week, a group of insiders joins me to offer perspective on some of the week's top stories. This week, sounding off on the outlook for the Indiana housing market, what's making waves at the Indiana Statehouse, and the Indy 500 lands a new title sponsor. We also may get some Super Bowl predictions as well. Our insiders this week, IndyPolitics.org publisher Abdul-Hakim. Also, Indiana Chamber of Commerce Senior Vice President of Communications Tom Schuman, and Beck Communications Group President Laura Beck. And welcome one and all to the Insiders for another edition. A couple of, I guess, economic indicators coming out as we get in 2019, and that's the overall housing market in Indiana. Jim Litton, the CEO at FC Tucker Company, came on. Record year last year. He expects perhaps more of the same as long as unemployment remains low, rates remain low, and those types of factors.
Yeah, and he made some really, really strong points. One of the key pieces about the housing market, I think definitely that I'll be watching, and I think many of us will be, are what millennials are doing in terms of their home buying patterns. The Fed actually had a report out last fall that shows that because of their student loan debt, they're actually not buying homes at the rate that ages at that time in life would have done. So that's going to be a really interesting impact, especially as baby boomers retire and downsize.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I want to get to you, Laura, too, on this, because at one time you worked at the ports of Indiana.
Many years ago.
Yeah, well, and this year, or in 2018, the ports of Indiana reported an all-time record year. You don't think of Indiana as a shipping state, but there are some big numbers. 14.8 million tons of cargo last year handled on Indiana's three ports in northwest Indiana, southern and southeast Indiana. 21% increase over the last record, so really some big numbers.
Yeah, the thing that's fascinating about the ports, and folks in central Indiana don't always realize that we have ports in Indiana. It's not pork. That's what I used to run into all the time. But it's really unique because we have a Great Lakes port, two, as you said, inland waterway ports. And the ports have traditionally had really strong leadership in both their commission and their port directors. And I think that's going to continue moving forward. We're still not on par with some of the large tonnage ports like Duluth, for example, Toledo, and even Cleveland. But we're really holding our own with Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit. And I think if we're continuing to make the investments that we're making and continue to be creative with economic development at the ports and continue to be strategic as they have been, we have a really, really bright future ahead.
Gary's still looking at the potential of that fourth port, Lawrenceburg, down, take advantage of the Ohio River. I know due diligence being done now, but that'll even add to our assets potentially down the line.
Abdul, as you can the shipping business, Governor Holcomb talks about infrastructure as being anything that connects Indiana to the world, so the nonstop flights, shipping, on the waterways.
Exactly. It's all part of a very comprehensive strategy, because remember, Indiana, crossroads of America, within a day's drive of 80% of the population. We always think about our roads infrastructure, but it's also, like the governor said before, it's also our airports with connecting flights. It's also, like you all said, our ports, and also it's our rural broadband, because once again, if you can't connect, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good.
Well, and a lot of things too, folks don't realize that thousands of people go to work at those ports every day because they work for the tenants. So that's a key economic engine, and it's also a great opportunity for economic development because of the site selection opportunities. So you've got all kinds of opportunities there to really boost those local economies as well.
And this is why people need to keep in mind when the people in D.C. talk about tariffs in our trade, a lot of that comes through our ports and directly has an impact on Indiana.
Yeah, all three of you follow activities at the Statehouse very closely. A lot of action as we continue on in 2019. And Tom, I know the Indiana Chamber did some polling recently on two of the big issues: cigarette tax, a proposed $2 a pack increase, and also bias crimes.
Yeah, strong support for both of those. Like similar polling that's been done, cigarette tax, real quick, 62% support that $2 a pack increase. 65% support raising the smoking age from 18 to 21. Bias crimes, it's over 70% support. And really what's important there, it doesn't matter political party, Republican, Democrat, Independent, there's strong support for enacting that bias crimes law.
So quickly, because the chamber supports those items, it didn't get support enough to pass the legislature last time. What gives you optimism or confidence that it has the juice this year to?
Well, on the cigarette tax, it's still up in the air what's going to happen there. Certainly, legislators are looking at a lot of spending requests and they may fill a budget hole with the money that's from that cigarette tax. But also Indiana's gone from 39th to 44th among the 50 states in smoking. We have almost 22% of adults smoke, so there are significant health outcomes. Hope is that that's realized and we push something through.
Abdul, you did some polling, some similar
Yeah, that's how I know my
results.
Chamber Friends polls are right, because they match exactly what we did back
You're so humble.
I know, of course.
You're so humble.
Or we say that yours was right because ours, but either way.
Exactly.
Either way.
My good friend Kent Branniger says the exact same thing. Yeah, no, it was interesting, though. There was a lot of support for an increase in cigarette tax, as well as bias crimes legislation. Something I thought was interesting when we did it was we also sort of broke it out by Trump supporters. And on the bias crimes legislation, where you think that would be the group that may have the most issues, a plurality, about 44%, were in favor of bias crimes legislation. Like I said, the same thing with the cigarette tax.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the challenges is especially as we're moving with this session, everything that the chamber is putting forth is reasonable, it makes sense, and it is supported by fact-based data. I mean, and it's bipartisan too. The challenge we have is moving these kind of proposals through the legislature until we have independent redistricting is going to be a challenge, because our districts are so gerrymandered that with the Republican supermajorities, they are so focused on winning their primary elections as opposed to the general elections. They're speaking to a very narrow voting bloc. And so that's a big challenge when you see numbers like this, because Hoosiers want it, but the way our electoral system is set up in the state, it really prevents some of those common sense legislative proposals from getting through.
Gary, one last quick point on the bias crimes. There's a lot of proposals out there. The important thing from the chamber standpoint and for many others is let's get a law passed. Let's get off that list of 5 states that don't have a law. Let's remove that perception.
We'll be watching that going forward, to be sure. More activity this week, kind of quality of life projects around the state of Indiana. Bottle Works, the big project in downtown Indianapolis, adding 2 new entertainment options. A new Fort Wayne hotel, another one in downtown Fort Wayne. Had a topping off ceremony this week, $18 million project, 136 rooms. We see a lot of these things in downtowns around the state, and they really are important for that whole, as mentioned, quality of life.
Quality of place, that's what it's all about, attracting people to Indiana, it ties into the housing affordability you mentioned. Having a place for those people to live and work. Lots of excitement in Fort Wayne. Again, we could talk about many places, but Parkview Field and the downtown, the Grand Wayne, and having this hotel complement that's a perfect addition.
All right.
And it's not just Fort Wayne, it's even some of the smaller places. When I have my lawyer hat on and going to courthouses, we look at what they're doing on in Shelbyville and Martinsville. I mean, this isn't your grandfather's Indiana anymore. People really are appreciating that quality of life component to economic development.
Definitely, and I think when you're also too talking about a project like Bottle Works, for example, and where it is situated, and it's a unique situation in Indianapolis and in the downtown, I'll be really interested to see if some of that development pushes east, because there are some really underserved neighborhoods, and to see some of that growth and development possibly going east would be really welcome.
Yeah, and we're going to do a story next week from Madison, downtown Madison.
Great.
Redoing an old mill down there, so another example. Indianapolis Motor Speedway, more big news this week. A new title sponsor for the Indianapolis 500 Gainbridge, which is an online financial services platform, will be the title sponsor, the presenting sponsor of the 500.
It's fascinating to see how companies select sponsorship opportunities to advance their brand. And so I think as we learn more about this company, it really shows how they are either they're being very strategic or they really like racing.
Because a lot
of
most people you ask probably don't know that name, Gainbridge.
And also, I think it's interesting too that here's an online financial services platform. Partnering up with one of the oldest things in racing, something that's more than 100 years old.
Yeah.
You're thinking it'd be like a tire company or a motor oil company, but no, it's online financial planning.
So Gary, they hope everybody knows their name after May this year.
After May, exactly.
Sponsorship,
a lot of momentum out at the track. We'll see how that plays out. We only have 20 seconds and need the Super Bowl prediction.
Well, we're sitting here in Indiana, so it's against the Patriots, whoever's playing the Patriots. So Rams, we'll say Rams by 7.
Yeah, anybody but the Patriots.
Okay, I like that.
I grew up in Chicago, went to law school in St. Louis, so 2 teams that really do nothing for me.
It's all about you.
But you'll be watching, right?
Yeah.
I'll be watching commercials.
Commercials.
Hope for better commercials.
Very good. Tom Schumann, Laura Beck, also Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Thanks very much. We'll be right back.
Thank you.